All right, so now we're in some real world low key, and I'm finding it's very difficult. One of the difficulties is when you have a wide open light source, and this is what I meant by having distance between your background and your subject. That ends up, well, in this case, it's a couple of inches lower. That ends up lighting your backdrop, and once you do that, it's really hard to achieve a good low key effect. And I understand that that's going to be a challenge, and one of the ways to do it is to, like I had shown before, cap your light and then just pay attention to how those shadows are falling and maybe change your angle a little bit until you can get a backdrop that's a little bit less impacted. Well, now the light's actually hitting my lens. So when you cap that light down and kind of shift the angle, again, trying to avoid hitting the bottom, but also avoid having the light go straight into the lens and create a bit of a lens flare, that becomes the challenge. I had it actually just before I turned this video on. I just don't know exactly what angle I'd had it at. So as you're doing that, just try to pay attention to it and set something up if you can. So for example, if I did it more like this, now I do have a lot more isolation, and the distance between that sheet and this platform, which is just the bottom of a coffee cup, really helps a lot to create the effect. Again, I'm trying to avoid that lens flare. So it's a delicate balancing act. Now on top of that, and you can see there's a 1 second exposure, and that's because I'm letting quite a bit of light in. The dimmer I make it, it'll switch to 3 and sometimes 5. And so the longer that your exposure is, the harder it's going to be to stay still. So if you have a tripod, you can solve it that way. But what I'm trying to do here is just get the image and hold it as steady as I can. Maybe let a little bit more light in till it goes back to 1 second. Maybe get it a little bit closer. And then hopefully that turns out. So that's sharp enough. And one of the things that you'll see when you're doing these experiments is you'll see, let me just flip back here. Oops. You'll see this and this. And that's basically blur from motion, or sometimes blur from digital noise. And so there's ways to clean up digital noise, and that's okay if it happens. Don't try and beat yourself up too much. If you had a DSLR, it's a much cleaner sensor, but we're just kind of struggling to work with what we've got to achieve the look. So it's kind of like hacking, and the best results will come with lots of patience and trying to think about ways that you can change your angle and get your light to work without having a lot of that backdrop shot, and then trying to hold that as steady as you can. So if you do have some way of propping the camera or the phone, that will help. But if you don't, basically distance between the background and more light will help to speed up the shutter so that you don't have to hold your camera or your phone quite so steady, and will also, if the distance between the background is there, that'll help you a lot in trying not to have light spilling onto the cloth or the backdrop or whatever it is that you've got. So again, it's just a lot of trial and error and patience to try and get the look that you're going for. I'm going to try a different light reference angle and then do one more, and then I'll close this one out. And again, that, if that's one of your shots, that's okay. Just try your best to hold it steady, to work with your light, and to keep that distance between your subject and your backdrop as far as you can. Because again, that's the key here, is to try and get, I should keep it this way, to try and get that subject lit without the backdrop being lit. All right, that's it for today.